The water crisis in Gauteng is intensifying as the Department of Water and Sanitation, in collaboration with the provincial government, urges municipalities to tighten water restrictions. With water systems already under severe pressure, Deputy President Paul Mashatile highlighted the urgency of the situation in the National Assembly. Cities like Johannesburg and Tshwane have already moved to level 1 restrictions to conserve resources amid the growing strain. For more on this, let's now welcome Benoît Le Roy, the CEO of the SA Water Chamber. Mr. Le Roy, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Afternoon to you and the viewers.
First of all, can you provide an overview of the current water crisis in Gauteng? What are the key factors contributing to this situation?
The key factors are that for the last 2 years or so, Rand Water have been reporting that the main reservoirs for the 3 metros have been running between 20 and 30%, and they should be running between 60 and 80%. And this is right through winter also. So this means that seasonal demand is overshadowed by leaking infrastructure. So the leaking infrastructure, or we call it non-revenue water, is in actual fact the big issue. So it's an asset management issue. It didn't happen overnight. It took about 30 years of underinvestment to materialize. And right now I think it's panic stations because we have a trip in a Rand Water pump station and all of a sudden big parts of Tshwane don't have water. You should have 48-hour storage. If you built the city according to 48-hour norms, etc. The population has grown, but we haven't grown the infrastructure and we haven't maintained existing infrastructure. So I think from an overview perspective, the 2 metros are in a bad situation. Ekurhuleni defies the odds, is relatively better, probably because the infrastructure is a bit younger. We're not too sure about that.
And having said that, Mr. Le Roy, what role does Gauteng's rapid urbanization and population growth play in the current water crisis? How are these demographic changes even impacting water demand and supply?
So the population has really grown. And I remember when Gauteng was below 10 million, 7, 8 odd million, let's say 20 years ago. It's now reportedly around 16 million, Joburg from 2 to 6 million. So it's grown. And what we've done is we've added access to basic services, including water, to everybody. And but what we didn't do is look after the bulk infrastructure that existed and the reticulation existed. We've added to it, and we just don't have enough good infrastructure. We don't have enough storage in that infrastructure. So population has had compounding effect on the neglect of the infrastructure.
Gauteng is home to some of South Africa's largest cities, including Johannesburg and Pretoria. So how does the water distribution system in Gauteng work? What are its biggest challenges?
So Rand Water provides most of the bulk water that it abstracts out of the integrated Vaal River system. And it abstracts it, it purifies it according to its water use license, and then pumps it great distance to reservoirs at the battery limits or the boundaries of the metros. And there's quite a few of these large reservoirs. And from there, they supply the municipal reservoirs and pump stations, and the municipality distributes. So the wholesale is Rand Water, and the retail are the metros, the local municipalities, and they distribute it. And, Joburg has about 12,000 kilometers of water distribution network. It's a lot. Pretoria, with nearly half the population, has the same amount because it's spread out quite a lot. So these are big systems, and they have a design life of 40 to 60 years. And most of them 30 years ago were approaching the end of its life. So, they really passed the useful life, which means you can't patch it up. You need to replace thousands of kilometers of pipework, and this is where Joburg has mentioned is 26 billion rand in their case that they need to replace, which is roughly a quarter of their asset, including their sewage transmission and sewage works. So it's on the balance sheet there's 130 billion rands of water sanitation assets in Joburg. It's the biggest investment in a city. It's much more than electricity, for example, and roads. Right. It's a very big investment, but like anything, all infrastructure has to be looked after, and it hasn't, and now it's caught up.
And how is the current drought situation in South Africa really affecting water availability in Gauteng? Are there any long-term impacts expected?
So we in 2002 basically had allocated 98% of our water. It's over allocated in most areas. So that's going to be the next crisis. But at the moment, there's no use in putting new water into a leaking bucket. We've got to fix the leaking bucket. But that's why the Superhighlands Phase 2 is in construction. It is late, but it wouldn't help us now because the more water we pump into the leaking bucket, the more it leaks. We won't get to the end user, as we're finding out. So there's generally speaking a consensus in the master planning process that we will run out of water in 2030. It could be before that because of, let's say, a lack of rainfall and also because of very hot weather, so climate change induced. And there are plans to do this, but again, the master plan was published 2018. We're supposed to embark on it from 2020 to 2030 and spend 900 billion. We've only committed 100 billion, and that's in the last 2 years. So we're late on that also. So that will be the next crisis that will arrive. Once we fix our networks, our distribution delivery systems, we're going to find that we're not reusing enough water. We're not putting more water from the coast, for example, etc. So we've got multifaceted crises developing, and unfortunately we predicted this in 2002. So we can sort it out, and I believe we will, because the crisis is quite severe. But we've got to get to workshops from the talk shops.
And what's the state of Gauteng's water infrastructure? I mean, are you at liberty perhaps to tell us how old the infrastructure is and what kind of investment or even repairs are needed to address the current inefficiencies or water leaks?
So Joburg has announced a number of 26 billion rand publicly. So between the other two metros, we think if you add that, it's probably around about 50 billion rand plus that needs to be injected into Gauteng to reinstate the three metros. And this is not patchwork. It's replacing and rejuvenating thousands of kilometers of pipework. So we're talking probably between the 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers of pipework between the three metros. And the private sector has the ability not only to do that, but to fund it. But that can only be done when the climate is a lot more friendly towards the private sector, and that the politics have been handled, because with the political uncertainty at the moment, it's very uninvestable, it's unbankable. So we've got to sort out, it's quite a perfect storm, unfortunately, and climate change is, as we've seen in Europe and in Spain recently, the biggest impact is water, so it's either not enough or too much. So, eThekwini went through it, they had too much, now they don't have enough. So we've got to adjust to these multifaceted attacks we have from climate change to population growth and to old infrastructure. So the infrastructure, generally speaking, about half the infrastructure is over 50 years old. Some in Pretoria, in this inner circle of Pretoria, what was called Pretoria, now Tshwane, there was 113 years old, the ex-mayor Brink found. He was quite proud of it that it lasted that long. So right. You can see, we way past the usefulness of the old infrastructure.
All right, Mr. Benoit, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.